Amid that fragile ceasefire, another public clash has captured headlines around the world. President Trump has issued a series of public attacks against Pope Leo XIV for continuously and fervently criticizing the war in Iran. But despite the pressure from his home country, the Holy Father has not backed down from his message of peace.
I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person.
What began as a social media post has now become one of the most direct disagreements between a pope and a sitting president in recent history. The controversy began last Sunday night when the president posted a lengthy and sharp critique of Pope Leo on his Truth Social account. Trump writes in part that, quote, Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. I don't want a pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He then tells the pope to be thankful he was elected because, quote, if I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. On Monday, he doubled down on his Sunday criticism of the Holy Father in comments to reporters.
Will you apologize?
No, I don't, because Pope Leo said things that are wrong. He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran.
Pope Leo quickly issued his own response while on the papal plane. He was just beginning an apostolic journey to Africa. When speaking to journalists on his flight to Algeria, the Holy Father said in English that he will not shy away from sharing the gospel.
I have no fear, neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. I am called to do what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear today.
Frank Roca, EWTN News senior Vatican analyst, says it was a bold call-out from the Holy Father, who seldom mentions world leaders by name.
I found that very striking and even shocking because it sounded very defiant. Here a pope is speaking with a Chicago accent, and he's using words like off-ramp, and he's talking about U.S. politics. That has much more of an impact.
Leo has prioritized a mission of peace since he first stepped out on the loggia nearly 1 year ago. But since the start of the war in Iran, his criticisms of conflict have become more fervent.
Everyone who knows him, who works with him, says that he's very methodical, very deliberative, very cautious. He's much more vocal. Italian friends of mine said that, remarked on that. They said, wow, he's really found his voice. And I think that's true.
Nearly a dozen bishops and archbishops in the United States have spoken out to condemn Trump's criticism of the Holy Father. Among the first to issue a statement was the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Archbishop Paul Coakley said he was disheartened by Trump's post, writing, quote, Pope Leo is not his rival, nor is the Pope a politician. He is the vicar of Christ, who speaks from the truth of the gospel and for care of souls. Some bishops also called out Trump for posting a now-deleted AI image that critics say portrayed Trump as Jesus Christ. The image garnered widespread pushback across the political spectrum. Trump did not apologize for the image, but claimed he thought the image showed him as a doctor. Bishop Michael Olson of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas, called the image highly insulting and blasphemous and said the president owes the Holy Father and Catholics an apology.
I think the President of the United States likes to mix it up on social media, and I actually think that's one of the good things about this president is that he's not filtered.
Other top Trump allies have defended the president and hurled their own criticisms towards the pontiff.
I love the Catholic Church. I just wish they stick to fixing the church because there's issues. I know because I'm a member. And stay out of politics.
A pontiff or any religious leader can say anything they want, but obviously if you wade into political waters, I think you should expect some political response.
Vice President J.D. Vance, who converted to Catholicism, not only downplayed the AI image, saying he believed the president intended it as a joke, but also suggested the Pope should be careful on matters of theology.
if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant.
The day after Vance made those comments at a Turning Point USA event on Tuesday, Bishop James Massa, chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Doctrine, issued a statement clarifying the church's stance on war. He writes, "When Pope Leo XIV speaks as supreme pastor of the Universal Church, he is not merely offering opinions on theology, he is preaching the gospel and exercising his ministry as the vicar of Christ. The consistent teaching of the Church is insistent that all people of goodwill must pray and work toward lasting peace while avoiding the evils and injustices that accompany all wars." Trump directly addressed this statement when holding a press gaggle on Thursday afternoon.
I'm all about the gospel. I'm about it as much as anybody can be, but I can't allow, as President of the United States of America, I can't allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
That bishop who issued the clarification on the Catholic view of just war theory joins us now. Bishop James Massa is the chairman of the U.S. Bishops' Doctrine Committee and the auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Brooklyn. Your Excellency, thank you for joining us. First, your reaction to the news of this week and President Trump's attacks on Pope Leo XIV.
Yeah, when all this was happening here in the United States, all the news reportage on the Pope and the President's statements, the Holy Father was, of course, in Africa on a pilgrimage of peace. What a beautiful event yesterday at St. Joseph's Cathedral in Cameroon, where he gathered with an imam, a Protestant minister, an animist chief, and a Roman Catholic sister. And they all gave testimonies, beautiful, powerful testimonies to peace, followed by the Holy Father's own plea for peace in the world. So this is what fundamentally he's doing as teacher and pastor, trying to make an appeal to the nations to find other ways to resolve these decades-long conflicts.
And we'll have a full report on the Pope's trip to Africa right after this as well. Your Excellency, a number of the president's allies, House Speaker Mike Johnson, border czar Tom Homan, among others, have said something this week along the lines of Pope Leo needs to stay in his lane and not wade into politics. But is Pope Leo being political when he speaks about peace?
It's a peculiarly American problem in a way because of our history of church-state separation and all. The Catholic faith pertains to every aspect of life. We can't segregate it, to one area. Obviously, our faith informs our conscience. And every citizen in the United States has to make a decision of conscience when they pull the lever on election day to vote for someone, when they take a stand on the current issues in front of us. And right now, the war in Iran is in front of us, and God willing, the peace efforts now will bear fruit in the coming days. But we have to let our faith inform our view of the world and problems we're currently facing. So there can't be a separation.
And just following up on that, clarify for us, have popes throughout history spoken out against war and on foreign policy issues? Put that into context for us, the Pope's role on the global stage when there's global conflict.
Exactly. What comes to mind is 110 years ago, our Holy Father then was Pope Benedict XV. And as World War I was raging and across Europe, the Holy Father then made pleas for peace. He was a promoter of the concept of the League of Nations, the precursor of the United Nations. He saw the slaughter of that First World War taking place, and it led him to a cry of the heart to the leaders of the nations to lay down their arms and find their way to the peace table. And of course, this was a war that was being waged by baptized Catholics and baptized Christians against other Christians. So the futility of it troubled him deeply. And then, in more recent times, Pope John Paul II in the early 2000s took a strong stance on the war in Iraq. So Pope Leo was following in the tradition of the great popes of the 20th century who addressed, and along with Pope Francis, who addressed issues of conflict around the world.
A great history lesson for all of us. Your Excellency, J.D. Vance is our nation's second Catholic vice president. In comments made at a Turning Point USA event earlier this week, the vice president said Pope Leo needs to be careful when talking about theology. Let's take a listen.
When the Pope says that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword, there is more than a 1,000-year tradition of just war theory. Okay. Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
Bishop Massa, okay, the vice president just raised the issue of just war theory there. So can you give us a brief explanation of what just war theory is, and have Pope Leo's comments been in line with the church's tradition on just war theory?
Sure. I have to say I cringed a little bit, hearing the vice president lecturing the Pope on just war. Of course, it goes back to the early church, St. Augustine, St. Ambrose, in fact, the intent of the just war theory is to establish the criteria for when it is just to go to war. And then once you've established the conditions that allow for that option, then you have to also apply moral reasoning to the conduct of the nation in war. So we have what we call the just reasoning for going to war and just reasoning for the conduct of the country during war. And you're asking questions: is this a last resort defense of the people when an aggressor has caused grave and certain danger? Have all other options been exhausted? Diplomacy, negotiations, etc. And then, is there a real chance of success? And the other very important criterion is, will the fighting cause worse evils than the harm that you're trying to stop? So the just war theory is never a blank check for violence. That's the bottom line. And it requires moral judgment, moral reasoning.
And of course, St. Augustine was one of the greatest contributors to just war theory, and our Pope is Augustinian. Your Excellency, one of Pope Leo's comments drawing the most attention is when he said God does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. And you addressed that in your statement on just war theory this week, writing, a constant tenet of that 1,000-year tradition is a nation can only legitimately take up the sword in self-defense once all peace efforts have failed. That is, to be a just war, it must be a defense against another who actively wages war, which is what the Holy Father actually said. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war. Bishop Massa, do you mind expanding on that, especially for Catholics who may have been surprised to hear the Pope make those specific comments?
Sure. The Pope is not saying that God doesn't hear the prayers, listen to the prayers of our American soldiers, men and women in the military, or the Israeli soldiers, or soldiers on the other side of a conflict. Of course, God hears everyone's prayers. What he's citing a verse from the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 15. And the context of that verse was that after the Assyrian Empire had destroyed much of the kingdom of Judah back in the Old Testament, 8th century, there was a lot of injustice, and violence was being used by the rulers of the country against their own people. And so whenever violence is used unjustly as an act of aggression, then God looks with great disfavor on the one perpetrating the violence. That was the Pope's intention. He's saying, are we the aggressor in this military engagement? Now, of course, he's not ignorant of the tremendous problems that Iran has caused as a state sponsoring terrorism and et cetera. He's very well aware of that. But but looking to the conditions for a just war, he has to raise the question: have the conditions been met for this to be a justified use of force?
Really important context there. Your Excellency, my final minute with you. Pope Leo XIV, he began his pontificate with the words, "Peace be with you all." And just last week, Pope Leo hosted a peace vigil at the Vatican. Can you reflect briefly on how this theme of peace has been central to his pontificate so far?
Yeah, it was so beautiful. La pace sia con tutti voi, he said, the very first words of the pontificate. Of course, he was speaking the same words that our Lord spoke on the night of the resurrection to the apostles. And I think just as Pope Benedict XV, back at the time of World War I, saw the testimony to peace, the witness to peace as an essential component of his pontificate, so Pope Leo sees the same. As we enter this period in which war is becoming ever more dangerous with, with drone warfare and the use of AI technology that subtracts human agency from the waging of war, we're living in very dangerous times. And the Holy Father feels deeply that his role as a peacemaker, in the spirit of St. Francis, whose 800th anniversary of death we celebrate this year, he has to be a promoter of peace. And he's doing exactly that in Africa this week, and we will continue to hear from him in a similar way.
Absolutely. Bishop Massa, we so appreciate your time this week. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Catherine.